Welcome, everyone. My name is Josephine Greenbrook, and I am the current chair of the Society for the Study of Social Problems Transnational Initiatives Committee. And on behalf of myself and Dr. Lena Gross, as organizers of this keynote roundtable, as well as our committee and the Transnational Virtual Initiatives Committee, the SSSP and the Orfala Center at UC Santa Barbara, we welcome everyone to this important and timely keynote event. With this roundtable, instead of providing usual top-down lecture, we are seeking to platform and amplify a conversation. If we really want to take decolonial methodologies and theories seriously, we need to step back from conventional structures and statuses and hierarchies traditionally connected to academia to instead nurture dialogical knowledge exchanges. So with this, we have invited the following speakers to today's roundtable. We have Issa Djesa, Eva Maria Fjellheim, Mayssa Rekhis, and Lena Gross, who will also serve as our discussant today. And I will pass the word on to you, Lena.
Good evening. And I'm very happy to introduce you to Issa Djesa, who is both an associate professor in anthropology at the Arctic University of Norway and also working in the administration as an academic advisor at the Center for Sámi Studies, also at the Arctic University of Norway. And it's very special, like this double capacity, because you draw on 30 years of working with international students, advising them. You also use your academic knowledge and research on knowledge and power hierarchies in the North-South context and intercultural communication. But then also you have the embodied knowledge, what it means to be an international student. You came from Cameroon to the most northern university of the world here in Tromsø. And this together informs your, what you're gonna talk about today. Earlier today, we talked a little bit about what the session is gonna be about. And Rachel, you said that in your experience, students from the Global South that come to Tromsø far too often experience that their hopes and their potential is not met, and that the university, instead of helping them fulfilling whatever dream we all have when we become students at a place, the university rather turns into a wasteland for them. And maybe you could just start and...
Yeah, thank you, Lena, for introducing me, and then thank you for inviting me to this meeting. Happy to see all these new faces, and really humble to share with you my experience as myself coming from South, from Cameroon, and then working for these 30 years with international students, and really burning to help them see the potential they have in them, which sometimes is not easy if just relying on what is given from the educational system. And what I want to share with you is a reflection that is taking place now. It's not something I have already written, but it is something I'm working on. And I hope it can lead to in the future to a transformative pathway about methodology or pedagogy when meeting or dealing with students from South. My background also make it not so easy to speak in English. I wish I can speak in Norwegian. It's easier, or in French, but I will try. saying that it is a wasteland. I'm afraid that when students come here after 2 years for their master thesis or 6 months for some courses, I'm wondering what do they take with them? And the experience from the master in indigenous studies, where I'm working now, and the master in visual anthropology, that is my background, educational background, is that many end with diploma without understanding what we want them to take with them. And this can be shown, or this is seen also in after the education. What then? What to do? Many are jobless, or when we are taking exams and even asking about some key concepts in the program where we are, after 2 years, many do not understand what we expect them to know or to understand, or the tool we want them to master in order to use it when they're out or back in their communities. And I believe that education is important for building human capital. When it is well done, it generates benefits for both the individual and the society, especially for students who have, how can I say, not privileged background or not privileged social groups, as many who come and take this master in indigenous studies. They are not from the majority group, and acquiring really what is needed to succeed in academia is a challenge, and even to succeed in a program that was meant for them. For example, the master in indigenous studies and the master in visual anthropology is also quite challenging. My experience especially these last 5-10 years, was about disappointed, I call it disappointed students and disappointed staff. Disappointed students because when they entered my office as advisor, they came in crying, saying, "Madame Rachel, why did I fail my exam? I give them what they asked me to give. I reproduce my curriculum. I answered the question, but I don't understand why I failed, why I got E, why I got F, why I got T. I wish I can get A, excellent, or B, very good." It has not been so easy to really help them see what is expected in this program. And then from the other side, as staff, instead for trying to understand what are the challenges these students are meeting, I used to have this explanation. This is a master program. They are supposed to have these basic skills before starting the program. So I was drawn between two groups, the student wanting to help them, and then loyalty to the staff, to the program, to maintain the standard. I don't want a bad standard or low standard for the program, but at the same time, I see these students are lacking something. And I'm trying to bridge between the two groups. And in my reflection, I was thinking something needs to be added to what these students already have. But what is it, and how to add it in a system, in a program that is already fixed, and how to integrate that is what is missing and they need in that program. And for me, spending 2 years, this is really expensive for each individual, both living the family economically, the challenge of entering a new society, because I did it. I know what it is after 30 years in this society. And this is also one of the reasons that I'm trying to help as much as possible students to succeed, not to go back more confused than when they came, and being more dangerous when they go back to their home society than when they came. What we did for 2 years ago is, since it was not possible for the program to take into consideration the need, we organized, I asked alumni from this program who in a way understand the system to really organize the idea or call for a meeting for new international students, especially African international students, to discuss about what are the challenges and to help them really to succeed in the program within 6 months or 2 years stay at the University of Tromsø. And it was during this meeting that I discovered also something that is very important, and this is why I'm trying to find a way to integrate it in the program. And it was during the discussion, a kind of workshop, that students trying to compare or to understand what do they miss or what do they lack from their former or previous education starting to study at the University of Tromsø. And then in the discussion or in the description of what is missing, part of it is the competitive way of studying. Back home, it is a competition because the best, you have to be best, you have to have best grade, and in competition with others, you do not collaborate, you do not work together. This was one aspect. Another aspect was the type of education they have at home. And then they realize that at home, they have to memorize. And this is why when they enter to my office, they said, I give to the teacher what they ask me, but I failed because they memorize and they give back what they have memorized. And it is not about that. So the new system, educational system, asks them for critical thinking, which I'm still working on that. What is it? How can you teach students at the master level critical thinking when they are convinced that, and many students came to my office and say, I was best at home. I am a good student. There is something wrong with this program and with this system. So different expectations, different experiences. So bridging the two system was the challenge I try to really deal with in order to make the institution, the staff understand what is missing to really help students coming far away to get knowledge, to have new skills, to develop competence. And this in-between position is not it's not so easy. And what I discovered just some days ago, maybe the African concepts of transition, rites of passage, was a good entry point to bridge between the two groups. Because if the staff just think of this is a master level, students should have the basic competence needed before entering here. It's a wrong starting point because their background is different and they have not chosen to be there. This is how it is there, and especially African students, when we know that all the educational system is a colonial one. And this is what has been discovered when we have this workshop. We said, we are independent, the country is independent. How do we leave colonialism today? This is the fourth generation after the independence in the 60s. So many of the younger generation, they do not have any direct experience or understanding of what happened about colonialism at that time. But they are reproducing something without understanding the consequences of that. So the workshop helped us to see, oh, in a way, I have inherited something I did not understand. Why I'm memorizing? Memorizing is part of what I have been taught. In addition to that, the oral tradition, for example, or the African tradition, it's forbidden to challenge elders. You do not ask questions. The combination of all these, okay, colonial education and then traditions make it difficult to see these and to understand these challenges. But for students, it's not only to understand, but it's to change, because they think and believe this is the best way to do it. And even though I tried to argue with some of the students, they said, this is how we do it at home. It was good. It is not like here. So the problem is the system. Using the transition concepts in the rite of passage maybe can help see that, okay, I have to let it go. I have to move to a new stage when it comes to my education also. Maybe because life is movement, and then by changing all the time and being aware and conscious of the changes and adapting to the new stages or new places, new environment, maybe can be the solution, not only for the students, but for the staff and for the program, to see that we have to meet those students where they are and to accept their background to help them move further. But for the students, they have to understand that, okay, they have to leave these value back home, these educational norms or knowledge they have acquired during all these years, and then enter a new one. And maybe this African, usually, or it's not only African, but the rite of passage, it's much used in Africa, maybe the way to go. I don't know. I am working on this topic. I hope that it can lead to something useful for both the institutions and the students. I have some questions that I just want to read. I have developed for to work further for this topic. With this topic is, to what extent does the international African students' background impact the transition to studying in Tromsø? Are African international students unique or distant groups within the international category? And do they have academic and living experiences different from domestic students? How can the concept of transition relate to African international students? And what transitional challenges do they face? Are the university support system adequate for supporting African international students transition to succeed in studying and living in Norway? And what coping strategies do they develop to deal with the transitional issues? I focus on African international students because I have been working a lot with them and because of my background. But the issue is it's not only for African international students, but Asian one, and then even Norwegian ones. So it is, when it comes to a rite of passage to change in life, it is not only one group, but this is the process in life, and it can be seen in that way. It was a short presentation of what I have been working with, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I have some questions, but I think maybe we do them in the end, because then we can also come into a dialogue in between us. That's why I would like to present the next speaker, which is Eva Maria Fjellheim. And Eva is a Saami scholar. You have interdisciplinary background, and you're doing your PhD at the Center for Sámi Studies in Tromsø. It's on conflicts between two reindeer herding districts and the wind energy industry and the Norwegian state. So you follow two court cases for your research, and these court cases in Norway, they are, I don't know how to say it, you can say it better afterwards, Eva, but they are milestone court cases, and one of them might actually change the way indigenous rights also have to be taken into account when it comes to resource extraction. So there has been a lot of public attention and media attention to the court cases, and an extension also to you, Eva. And this is, I think, quite special, because even though a lot of PhD students work also on actual topics, I have actually never experienced that someone was so like asked for interviews and their opinions and to write something so much than you have been yeah, during the last years. And of course, the court cases were still ongoing in the beginning, and your research was ongoing, and you were asked to say something about this. And the reindeer herders, they were also asked extensively, like there were master students working on the topics, other PhD students, other researchers, the media, like everyone wanted a piece of them, which like you write about research fatigue, and how can you do research ethically in this context? And you have all your work also from Latin America, which I haven't introduced now, but you work a lot in Guatemala. And so in your work, you then have come up with you use the term committed research a lot, and you think a lot about methodology. How do we do research ethically, decolonial, and also what position do we researchers get from the knowledge we have as experts, and how can we use them? And that's why we invited you, because it's topics which we all should engage with. You kind of were forced, more than most people I know, to really go into the depth of them. And I thought maybe you could share a bit about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation to share some experiences with my research, and I would call them experiences because this is not going to be a theoretical elaboration of methodologies, but I want to share some of the challenges and opportunities that I have found wanting to apply a decolonial approach to my research. And thank you for introducing the topic and the research context. I'm not sure how knowledgeable the listeners are about the Saami and the Saami context. So I could say just a few more things about that before I begin. But I'm doing research on the Norwegian side of Sápmi, and Sápmi is the ancestral lands of the Saami that are now divided by the colonial borders of 4 states. But my research is located on the Norwegian side and in the southernmost area where I'm also from myself. So I've been accompanying 3 reindeer herding communities through different processes. One of these communities are my own family who are reindeer herders, and the other 2 are within the South Saami area, which is also linguistically different from other Saami areas. So just to give a brief context. And as Lena said, I've been following ongoing processes. One part are the court cases, and another part is also some political processes. For example, these consultations that are required when industries want to develop or extractive or other infrastructure developments on Saami reindeer herding lands. Yes, about maybe a good way of starting is a challenge that I have been trying to figure out how to resolve is this: when you study indigenous methodologies and also decolonial methodologies, you have some ideals, right? How research ideally should be carried out in terms of especially participation, co-production of knowledge, to use time to establish relationships and so on. And I found many times kind of this clash with these ideals and the reality. For example, we work within the structures of the university, especially as a PhD scholar, where you have a very limited time. You are not allowed to co-write with someone that write or participate more than you do, because then your thesis would not be approved. You don't have the budget to pay people to participate, which I think also is kind of value research participation. You also need to be compensated. So there are all of these things that kind of constrains this way you want to really do research. And that's on one side, and then it's the situation of these reindeer herding communities. So in this context, as Lena mentioned, there is a lot of pressure concerning their time and resources, because they engage in these court cases and other bureaucratic processes. Because I look at the wind energy industry, but in the same communities there are up to 5 other industries or infrastructure developments that they are expected to engage in dialogues with the companies and also in consultations with the state, answer to the media, and the increasing research interest in this area, because these conflicts have gotten a lot of media attention. So how to apply a decolonial research approach in a context where there is both research and participation fatigue. So what I have tried to do is to find a way to approach this is to accompany processes and be more of an observer. For example, I've done courtroom ethnography, to trying to document and analyze what is happening in the courtroom. They are already there. I'm not taking more of their time. I'm able to listen to the discourses like between the parties. And also I have been listening in, done participatory observation in consultation meetings. And I have also kind of tried to be present in situations that are important to them. So it's kind of, to accompany to also not only to collect data, but also to kind of, I think, for example, many of those who engaged in these court cases, they normally are sitting alone in the courtroom. There are not so many spectators. They don't have so many people they can discuss with, for example, or to support them if they want to just, you know, talk about what is happening. So that has been a part that I have been discovering as a value, that you are kind of, yeah, supporting them in the process. And trying to say something about these struggles without putting extra constraints on the time and the resources they have. Of course, it's not to say that I don't have conversations with them, but it's something different. I can also have an experience that talking to someone is different than being interviewed. It's something with this idea of being interviewed that puts more pressure, and I think it's always important to have conversations with people to also analyze together what is happening in the courtroom or in these consultations. Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of find a way that each context is different. So there's no one size fits all recipe of how to do it in the right way. But I think that maybe this tension between the ideal of increasing participation and the fatigue that is there, like how to solve this. I think it's something that we need to know more about, and also think more creatively how we can approach that. And if there was anything more you thought about, Lena, that I lost in my long answer here, please follow up with a question or remind.
Yeah, I thank you very much for the first answer. I was interested if you could say a little bit about committed research, which, if I understood you right, is very common in literature from Latin America, but which I haven't encountered so much in the English-speaking literature. Maybe you could just quickly say what you mean with it when you write about it.
Yeah. Yes, sometimes a word make a great difference, right? Because it is the way that I think activist research or action research have been termed more in Latin American context. And I really like it because it says something about your commitment when you engage in these research relationships, that you have a responsibility, and that responsibility can be enacted in so many different ways. Of course, one thing is to do no harm, but then it also the giving back aspect, or the reciprocity, that also is kind of this ethical pillar, one of the ethical pillars of decolonial and indigenous methodologies. Yes, by being committed, you cannot go in and extract knowledge and leave. You know, you have some kind of responsibility during the research process, but I also think that you have it after your research is kind of finished. So more than kind of giving back a product of a academic article or a thesis, being a committed researcher can mean many things, from the small to the bigger, right? So just sitting next to the reindeer herders in the courtroom is a way of contributing. It could be to document human rights violations. And I think each context has to define what kind of commitment you engaged in and what you can bring to it. And as you said, Lena, like how do you use your power, your position, and because I am now a PhD candidate researching this, the media are calling me, even though I would say a lot of the same things that the reindeer herders could say themselves, because I have that position, you know, I'm asked to give my opinion, and how do I use that power? And also the knowledge that I have acquired from these experiences and from this research engagement. So it's something that I want to continue to reflect on, and it's not a finished idea, but I really like the idea of being a committed or engaged researcher. And I think it reflects a lot of these aspects of decolonial, what decolonial research is about. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's actually a very good step to go on to Mayssa. Mayssa Rekhis is a medical doctor, an anthropologist, an educator, writer, and activist. So Mayssa, you're currently doing your PhD, and your work is situated between psychological and medical anthropology. So you look at experiences, discourses, and practices surrounding trauma and trauma therapies in relation to forced migration and exile in Sweden. But you also, or in your work, but also in your activism and teaching, you pursue an anti-colonial approach. And what we are going to talk about, or what you are going to talk about, is what is your experience with working in this anti-colonial approach in both in Europe and in Southwest Asia and North Africa. So what is a praxis of anti-colonialism in research and teaching? What does it mean? How is it possible? Is it possible, and how to overcome decoloniality as a mere metaphor? And also, what are the possibilities and limits to radical decolonial critique and practices in white dominant spaces? I'm very much looking forward to hear some answers or maybe more questions. Yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lena. And indeed, I think, it will be more questions than answers. And I will try to keep it very short because I'm really looking forward to the discussion with Rachel and Eva Maria and everyone attending. And there was a lot of things that were very common, I think, and it will be very interesting to move forward. I will just start maybe with a little bit of context in relation to how I landed here in this thought and reflection about anti-colonialism and decolonizing the work I do. And as you said, I have been working in this trio of activism, education, research, and art for the whole time I started working, I believe, and trying to have bridges in between them, not always very successful, but on a trial. And coming to anti-coloniality didn't happen a very long time ago. It was really during this last 3-4 years. And it started with a feeling of being lured and the feeling of being naive in relation to the work I have been doing in activism, as I was very much involved in human rights activism in Tunisia, where I am from, where I am born. I was raised and lived until I was 25 years old. And it was something that we brought maybe a little bit also in the last panel when Alexandra spoke about democratization processes in different countries outside Europe, and I was part of that. And then standing at some point and then moving to Europe and working with human rights activism also here. And then seeing the hiatus in what human rights would mean in different places, and how human rights can be a very neoliberal concept in the sense of starting as if everyone has the same rights, and all the states the same obligations, but still, and I have been working a lot on social rights and right to health, this highest standard, so the right to health is having the right to the highest standard of health, which means actually that the right to health in Sweden or Norway or Germany is inherently different from the right to health in Cameroon or Tunisia or India or Argentina. What we are speaking in terms of rights, we are speaking of a very, like, it doesn't take into consideration the history of extraction, of colonization. It is not about justice. It's about rights that are in a way very much reinforcing the status quo. And at that point, of course, feeling that I was lured for years working for human rights, championing for them, and thinking, oh my gosh, I think I was completely on the wrong path. And I arrived to this realization, of course, through, I won't pinpoint a particular moment, but it was readings, meeting people, engaging with different circles, and so on and so forth. And then that was also brought me back to the medical education I had and how colonized it was in the sense of this medical imperialism, if I use the words of Summerfield here, is like, and this Western biomedical status quo that needs to be reinforced, and that people that are not Western, which I am, and my colleagues were in University of Medicine in Tunis, will internalize, and we will also perceive any other practices around healing, around health, all other meanings as completely backwarded and non-valuable. And that was a difficult moment of realization, but that was what brought me in, this questioning about there is a lot to be done. There is a lot to be done in education, in research, and in activism. It's not, I think now the question is very much present, much more than, maybe 5 years ago. Like, it is more and more strengthened. But at the same time, I feel that it is already being, not greenwashed, like it will be decolonized washed. And it is becoming just like some kind of criteria for institutions and catchy words that a lot of programs are using just to follow a trend of being anti-racist. While at the same time, what's happening a lot is that decolonization is becoming a new form of neocolonization because it is built on the effort and work of racially minoritized people that are usually doing some extra work, all this diversity work, the decolonization work. They are getting all the extra tasks, which in reality is just reinforcing some kind of white structure and not bringing any structural changes to the programs, to the curriculum, to the research that is being done. So this is a little bit also one of the struggles, how to be able to do something without falling into the mere metaphor and so on and so forth. And then about how I am trying to do it, I think it is a lot of work on myself, first of all, and it really starts on that, and it's continuous, because at every time it was not just like a moment and you realize, oh, that was very I was like interiorizing colonial Eurocentric concepts and paradigm. Like, it still happens at very different moments, and it's still a lot of things that we still interiorize. And I think that's one of the main things in relation to that. It's a lot of reflection work, of reflexivity. And I am very grateful to anthropology, I think, in getting that, because that's not something that is part of medical education or praxis, unfortunately, and it should be. It's then in teaching, for example, but also in activism and so on, it is really about trying to go to the root causes and not to ignore the power structures we are in. And I think we have been doing that a lot, especially if I will focus, for example, in the health sector, whether medicine or public health or global health and so on. We do not look at power structures. We really try to think that we have technical skills, and these are apolitical, these are atheoretical, ahistorical, completely neutral, which is not. And this is just reinforcing the same mechanism that we are having. It is a little bit what Rachel said, in the sense of putting the whole responsibility on the individual, that, oh, this person is not having the right skills already coming into the master program. It's saying, oh, this person is not having health literacy, so they are not taking care of themselves. And we are just completely blind to the structures behind that. So I believe in relation to anti-colonial or decolonial methodology, that can be another discussion, but I think today we won't go into that wordings, but it is about uncovering these root causes, these power structures, and being able to critique them, but also trying to think beyond them, not to see them as, oh, this is how the world is, and we need to find a way. And I think this is what happened for us, not only in relation to colonialism, it's also what is happening in relation to capitalism, to the climate change. It's like, oh, it's the world. We need fossil fuels. We need wind energy. And this has been destructive for so many people, for so many communities, for so many countries. And it's just like, it's the way it is. And this is why we need to go beyond the critique, to think about action that can be different, but that needs to be radical, because it's not with small actions that we can really disrupt the system we are in. We really need to have this bigger picture. The problem, though, is that there is no ready recipe. Well, not to how to decolonize research or education, nor how to change things and to change power structure. So it is a very frustrating process. And I think this is also the risk that we face in teaching mainly, because in research in general, if we are committed, we go through the frustration, even if it feels like, oh, what can we do? We still go on it. But with teaching, this is something I faced. For example, I was teaching in France, and it was not a very mixed group of students, but and when we brought this issue, people were just like, students were, okay, but now we don't have anything to do. We should be extinct. I had a student who said, I don't see any other solution apart from humans being extinct. I'm not sure this is a bad solution, but I won't discuss that. But the problem is that we may create frustration and nothing more. And that also can create resistance. It can create resistance because people will say, yeah, but I am here to learn some skills, not to feel frustrated about how bad the world is. And that's something we need to navigate in order to be able to transform things. Because why are we bringing also anti-colonial thoughts and methodology into pedagogies? It is to create safer spaces for everyone to learn. It is to create more equal spaces. It is to create spaces where all experiences are valued at the same time, and we don't face this issue of having some students who are lacking, to go a little bit beyond this very colonial way of seeing things, that, oh, some people are lacking the right skills, some people are lacking the right mindset, are lacking the culture that is adapted to what we do. We need to, so it is actually for the students that we do it, but it can be very hard to convince them about the process, because it is a hard process. And this is a question that I will be very happy that we discuss together also, about how can we navigate this frustration and this resistance that we might face. Another thing I think that can be problematic is to make sure that at the same time we don't fall into this issue about white fragility and white comfort and protecting white feelings, but making sure that it is not a white non-whites conflict or struggle. And the main thing in anti-colonial and decolonial praxis is to have white allies. And true lies, of course, here I'm speaking, but this is also maybe self-evident for two reasons, because this is when we spoke, maybe that was the other panel. It was one after the other, and sometimes I'm not sure if things were said now or in the last panel. But we spoke about how a lot of people are marginalized and are actually facing the problems of the same oppressive system. And this is how we create allyship. But this is also how we avoid that decolonizing becomes a weight only on rationally minoritized people. If we have white allies, we can share the responsibility, we can share the tasks, and we can make sure that it is also a more equal way of doing it. And to be able to disrupt at the roots, we do need allyship across things. So, and because I want to keep very short, I will just also move to another part, but I'm not sure if we have the time to discuss everything. I'm looking at the time, but I can bring it quickly. Is doing anti-colonial work is very different depending on where we are. Doing anti-colonial work in France or in Sweden is very different from doing anti-colonial work in Tunisia or in Egypt or in Cameroon or in spaces that are post-colonial or maybe not. Neocolonization is continuing with extraction, economic dependencies, and so on and so forth. And here I will give some a glimpse from an experience I have been through for the last year and a half, where I joined an initiative of scholars, medical doctors, social scientists who want to bring or strengthen social science education in medical curricula in Arab-speaking countries, starting from the point that we need more critical medical curricula. And then the question came in relation to, of course, medical curricula are very Eurocentric. It's a lot of the Western biomedical model. But if we bring social science, and in particular anthropology, we also come with a very colonial weight. And we can face a resistance that is even bigger, because anthropology is still many times perceived in these countries as a colonial field. And the question is like, do we need new tools and new ways and new methodologies to do anti-colonial work in these spaces? Because the legitimacy of the tools can be also a whole big discussion. And that's again maybe about reinventing. It's not only about reinventing the world we want to be in, it's reinventing how we do it, where we do it, with whom, from whom. And it can feel very frightening, I think, to face all these questions that we need to change everything. But at the same time, what gives me hope is being here today and having the space and meeting other people who are doing the work. And I believe it is through sharing much more experiences, reflecting together, collaborating in a less competitive, very colonial way of doing, in a less egocentric, white man genius, finding solutions to everything way, in a way that we can collaborate and try to find solutions together. And I do believe that we can abolish borders, and this is something coming from the other panel, if we manage to act in a way that is anti-colonial and to go with solidarity and for requests of justice. And I will stop here for now because I don't want to get longer, and I'm really looking forward for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and I think you three talks, they fit very well together. And for the discussion, I would say that everyone who is there just can ask questions, that we don't do the usual structure that the 4 of us are, or 5 of us are keeping the word. But Henry, Jonathan, Alexandra, Lily or Patty, if you have questions or comments, just please bring them in as well. And yeah, Alexandra.
Thank you so much. It's been fascinating listening to you. And I have a lot of different questions that I would like to ask each and every one of you. And in relation especially to teaching or to encountering students and trying to kind of like see how we offer them an equal footing, because I'm not like the ways that we can do that. And I'm wondering whether this also needs to be put on the institutions. Like if you like, we have this idea that to be admitted to a program, you compete and you are admitted because you're the best. It's a competition. It's not like an open invitation and everyone can study. But at the same time, doesn't necessarily that mean that you will have the same starting point with the rest that competed to be admitted. And then also the universities always also have this kind of like different kinds of policies for diversity, broadening recruitment, etc. But in my experience, at least, there is a severe lack of resources, and it ties back to the structure of how once we admit people and once we have been the good institution that has diverse student group and has broadened the recruitment, and who is there to do this follow-up? Who is there to say, dear university, you're accountable?
I have kind of a weird perspective on this. I teach at a community college, and I'm not sure that everybody understands what a community college is, but it's a 2-year college that has both technical education and education leading to going to a 4-year college and so forth. And the particular institution that I teach at has what is called open enrollment. We don't have a standard. I think that they have to pass like one like literacy test, and that's about it in order to get in. And that sounds really good, right? Democratic, open, allows us to have lots and lots of first generation college students and so forth. But the problem is that the institution still acts like every other college / university. Like there's no, like, to give you an example, like if you need so-called remedial help in mathematics or reading or any of that kind of stuff, those courses are not covered by financial aid and they're not given any credit. So it's very hard, and it essentially means that the people who are in those situations are starting behind almost immediately. And so there's not like, there's always this tension of, as a teacher, I often find myself going to the lowest common denominator and not really offering like the best quality information in my choices for students, because I've always got in the back of my mind, there are going to be students in my class who won't get this, who won't understand it, who don't have the background. So it's a real dilemma. And of course, if you add on top of that, the layering that we're talking about here today, which does affect some, I mean, we have a lot of first generation immigrant students as well, first, second generation immigrant students. So some of what we're talking about today also layers on top of that. So it's I don't have an answer, by the way. I'm just like, I'd love to tell you I know how to fix this, but I have no idea how to fix it. But it's tough because on the one hand, I mean, I think that you have to really change the entire way we do college in order for this to happen. And I don't know that you can have like what we think of as scholarship and universities and so forth and have open enrollment at the same time without creating this kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, class divide. I don't mean it as a pun, but it essentially has, a group of people who are starting out of the starting gate with a lot of baggage on their back to get to where they need to go. So anyway, I just thought I'd offer that perspective because it's interesting to hear it in a different context than the context that I'm used to.
Lily, you're next.
Hi, I've really enjoyed this. It's been really interesting. And I guess one of the things that has really struck me from all three speakers is something I've been thinking a lot about in my own practice. So I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a psychology researcher. And the subject of experts by experience has become a big thing. So in clinical teaching and training, for example, where we say we have to have the involvement of experts by experience. And it feels like a very strange duality of you're either an expert by experience or an expert by academia. And I just found it really interesting that all three of you sort of touched on this experience of, Eva Maria, you were saying you're getting all these phone calls about being a PhD student because you're an expert, an academic expert, but you're embodied in lived experience. I think you said it was your family is one of the sort of reindeer herding communities that you're involved in. And that but you're being contacted as an expert who is a PhD student, not that sort of necessarily being valued, or Hashed, your sort of really strong own personal experience that informs how you support international students is sort of subsumed into the fact that you're part of the institution. And that's the expertise that is sort of valued, or even Mayssa, again, sort of this very biomedical model of the rational thinking and the scientific method as what's important, as opposed to your own lived experience as someone working against a sort of colonial project. So yeah, I guess I was sort of, to put that into a question, I suppose my question was sort of how you three reconcile this sort of being pushed into an academic expert or a sort of very hegemonic expert in a way that is very colonial. That's the value or the knowledge that we value, how you navigate that with your own experiences of sort of, actually my expertise comes from other things as well. Yeah.
I know that Josephine has a question directly to Eva.
A lot of what you were describing reminds me of the sociological perspectives on social movements research. And the ethics. I remember, I think Stefania Milan wrote a chapter on the ethics of social movement research, where she pointed out like 4 specific practices, and accountability in communicating results was one of them, which reminds me very much of the committed research perspective. But she also talked about how much she could reveal of dissenting practices in the communities she was researching. And I wonder if that's anything that came up, like if you choose as a person both with insider perspectives, but also insider access, but also then a person, as Lili was bringing up, that you have a status of a scholar and a PhD student and so on. If you choose how and what you communicate based on any specific principle or guideline, or more based on your gut instinct of what is right. Yeah, and of course, feel free to share the extent to which, because I know this is ongoing for you. So that's my question.
Yeah, should I just briefly answer? Yeah, because I have to be somewhere at 8:30, so I will have to leave after answering this. But yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, for your question. Of course, there are many dilemmas when you engage in these kinds of committed research relationships. When you gain trust, and sometimes the boundaries are blurry. When are you a researcher? When are you something else, an ally, and yeah, all of those things. And I think that it's, as anything, no clear answer maybe, but that maybe this could be openly discussed with the participants, those that are engaged in this process. Like sometimes they can be very explicit about things that they don't want to be revealed, and it could be very particular, for example, something in an ongoing court case that this is sensitive, this is something strategic, this is something that, you know, can really damage the process. Of course, that is something, in my view, you definitely have to respect. And there might be other things that you are unsure about. So maybe not only thinking 2 or 3 times through, but maybe 10 or even more, because there are many sensitive issues. It's about internal conflicts. Some would argue that, you know, you should also reveal that. But there's the counter argument would be like, yeah, whose place is it? And from what perspective are you revealing them, and what are the consequences, right? And what do we get out of it? What do we learn from it? In some cases that could be interesting, but maybe if you even take it up and see, like to understand why there are internal conflicts, it's not because people are not getting along, but there are some structures there also that kind of, you can call them colonial structures that have also accelerated or these kind of conflicts. So it's very difficult to navigate. But I think that, you know, a constant dialogue with the people you work with, and also re-reflecting and critically thinking about it enough times to make good decisions. So I don't know if I can say it in a more, a better way than that. But it's definitely important to think about. And thank you so much. I'm sorry that I have to leave, but I would really love to continue the conversation, but hopefully there will be other opportunities in another time. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Eva Maria. Thank you.
Yeah, tusen tack, Eva. I know you have, you have very much to do right now, so I really appreciate that you took your time. Yeah. I have a question for, okay, do you want, Henry, do you want to?
Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. I just wanted to, okay, let me, okay. All right. I'm in Rome, so I'm going to use the example of Rome. Can you ask the Catholic Church not to be religious? Question. Can you ask the European epistemologists not to be colonial when the nature in itself created the epistemologists in itself are colonial? Can we use the master tool to destroy the master house? So I don't know. I don't remember the right information. This is a difficulty I face in my research courses. I teach in the immigration and settlement program. 90% are recent immigrants, recent refugees, racialized, all that stuff. When I ask them, okay, if you know in my references, there is 1 or 2 Euro or North American authors. I want you to go into the Africa. I want to go into Asia because you're coming from somewhere. I need you to understand immigration from the global South as it affects the global South. It's very difficult to do it because all knowledge creation has been done for the North, most of it. Translated. So my question is, and I'm taking what Mayssa mentioned, I don't remember in this one, in the previous presentation, in the sense, how do we avoid jumping into the wagon of decolonization? There is a beautiful article written by Sri Lanka in London. How do we avoid to jump into the wagon of decolonization, and at the same time, the global South is absent in the way of influencing the process? I have tried 3 times, and I have miserably failed 3 times. I request funding from the Canadian government to bring a whole bunch of Central American to do an anthropological study of the state of the youth engagement in Canada. They didn't see the reason for it. And the comments they gave you, they don't see the reason, what benefit is that going to give to the Canadians. So those are things like I constantly asking you. And also, and let you know, I come from a strong critical whiteness studies. For me, the structure and the epistemology is embedded in whiteness, and in whiteness is embedded in colonialism, and colonialism is embedded into how we teach, how we engage in an institution. It's not a question, but if somebody can comment, that will be amazing. Somebody can comment, it will be amazing. Do we need, okay, those of us that are trying to get out of Eurocentric epistemology, very hard. Do we need white epistemologists, allies, building allies? Do we really need them if we are in the process of really trying to decolonize? Those are just, there are no answers, but I'm just thinking about it. I don't know what you think about that too.
Thank you very much, Henry. As we can hear, Henry is very passionate about this topic.
Oh, sorry, yeah,
I have been very, very much looking forward to this session. So.
I can maybe go and comment on that, and maybe start with the issue of, do we need to have white allies? I believe that yes, because I believe that even if colonialism is very much embedded in whiteness, it's not that all white people embed the same ideology. It is a little bit like the feminist movement had a lot of main allies, and maybe it is not needed, but I don't think we should close to allyship. I believe that allyship, maybe it is not like necessary or needed, and a lot of movements didn't necessarily need allyship, but we should be open for that. And as soon as we make sure that we do have true allies, I think we have more chance in making an impact. But about your comment, and I link it also to Alexandra's question, I think, in relation to the institutions, I will maybe go a little bit one step back and say, do we need to still keep this form of education that is universities? And do we still need to have people like considering these master degrees or PhDs as the ultimate degree that means expertise? And maybe that also goes with Lily's question. There are now, I think, here and there different types of education that are emerging, different schools that are more critical, that are more public, that try to navigate that. And the experience that Patty shared, that of course openness doesn't necessarily mean no problems. There will be problems, but there will be different ones. And we cannot find solutions if we don't try and face the problems first. So there is probably a way also to think a little bit. And I think it's always about that. When we want to decolonize, we need to look a bit that there is nothing that is written on stone, in the sense that we cannot change and move around it. And then maybe just to use the same time, but I won't stay longer, to also answer Lily's question about the expertise. I think it's it is hard to have, this jacket or vest or whatever of the expert, because you are a lecturer, because you are a researcher and so on. I think in teaching, it can be there are a lot of pedagogies to break that down a little bit, and to make sure that it is the way you design the classes, it's the way you talk to students, it's the way you make them not only believe, but be very confident in that everything they bring is something that is valuable for teaching. Their experiences, it can be their everyday, it can be their readings, it can be their experience when they were a patient sometime. Here I'm giving a lot of health references, but it's just because I'm working here. And that every experience is valuable in learning, and in their learning and in the learning of everyone. So to create a little bit more horizontal ways of learning. In research, I think many times it's much more of a bigger dilemma, in the sense of giving voices to your interlocutors, but at the same time needing to interpret. Of course, you can go back to them and have conversations to make sure that this is also what makes sense, but it is still, I think it's always harder to break. And Eva Maria's experience was very much illustrating that, because of all the barriers you face. And sometimes it's the language of the knowledge production, because you speak to your interlocutors in their language, and then you produce papers that are in English and that many of them won't even be able to read. So sometimes I think it's also about thinking about in which language do we create knowledge? Even if this won't be counted in our whatever, career development and so on, maybe we need to translate our article in the language we talked to them in, to be able to disseminate it in the context where it will be more important for them. And I will stop here.
What I was thinking, everyone is talking about context, right? In all three presentations, and that, of course, there's not one right answer. And I was thinking, Rachel, when you talked, I was thinking about disability studies. I mean, which have shown the more accessible you make any space, teaching, house, whatsoever, it's always good, not only for the group you think of, it's always better for the bigger group as well. So now, when we as teachers or administrate in the administration of university, so we meet students who don't understand, who just copy and then fail because that's not allowed. So they become kind of a problem, right? And we don't have the knowledge very often. We don't even understand why they don't understand. So, and I was thinking, if we turn around the gaze, we don't look at the students as the problem, because it's us. I mean, it's our job and we're failing it miserably. So we have to look at us. But then maybe not only as work, because what do we gain if we understand what is the problem with this student group? What do we gain as teachers? Which potential is there for all the other students as well, and for the university or academia? And I was just wondering if you have some thoughts about it, because we've been talking a lot now, but I think you were speaking quite concretely, and you've been working so much on it that
hearing what has been said, I was thinking maybe the main issues is the difference, the diversity. That is the baseline of life. Even though we have all these structures and then we have institutions, I think they have been created. And this is an institution in the northern part of the world, in Tromsø. And we have many students coming from all over the world and challenging this standard and this institution. Am I going to really take into considerations the difference they bring in this institution, or am I going to force on them the information, the ideas I already have fixed? It will not work. And if really we are learning institutions, we are here to teach new skills. What kind of skills are we teaching? What kind of competences are we giving to these students? So it is a long process. It is respecting this diversity. It's changing my position of teaching, but learning, because I'm ignorant to the experiences of my colleague, of the students. And this is the same situation for the students. Where do we meet with these ignorances from both sides? This is one thing. And am I ready to unlearn what I have been learning and open for the unknown, something that is new. And these have been the processes I have been through in the different researches I have been working on. Even I can say, and I have to work with female genital cutting issue in Norway, and how to stop harming these beautiful young children, girls, to be really, to go through these really painful processes. I cannot force the Norwegian government. The Norwegian government cannot really use force to stop these people. What I can do is to create bridge and communication to understand the different position and to create a new path. And this is the challenge, because we are used with routines and we maintain routines and we are comfortable with routines. But life is the unknown also. I found this concept of transition and parallel with rite of passage. And I was thinking maybe this is the way to go, to be open for the unknown. And this is what is maybe threatening for many, keeping just with what we know. It's not only the institution here, even the students or coming here, they want to keep with what they know. Yeah. And my philosophy is that if we have admitted a student in the program, and then there are challenges, I used to tell or to say to my colleagues that this is the chance of the students, and our job is to make the student understand what we want the students to understand. And ourselves, we learn from the experience of the students. It's a lot of work, but it is about commitment to be engaged when you want to really give, or I can say, add a new tool to better deal with the unknown. For me, it is what it is about. I don't know if I have answered to your questions, but yeah, if you have other questions, I can add. I have many examples. It's just working with examples, it will help. And I use also to say that it is, we make the road by walking, as Paulo Freire said. And, otherwise, really, we are harming those we meet and what we are doing. So these institutions, these structures were created once in history, and they can change. And even human beings is a cultural being. We learn, we unlearn, we learn, and we unlearn. So it's a commitment from my side when it comes to forming or learning or teaching or educating. I don't know which concepts fits better. Good.
Could I ask a question, Rachel? I guess it might get a little bit nerdy and technical because I also work with the theory of liminality and transitions. So, but in rites of passage and transitions that are based in tradition or cultural practices of some sort, then there usually is a specific pathway through this transition, right? There's often, if we go back to like the basis of it, there is somebody who's going to be, you know, the master of ceremonies, the leader, the person that's going to, or the people, the group that is going to help you through this transition, right? And in our situation, we could say that education is a form of transition. Teachers are these guides through education, and so on. In more recent work on liminal theory and transitions and stuff, there is a lot of discussions on modernity as a rite of passage, as a transition, as a phase of suspended liminality, and we look at the idea of a transition that occurs because of a collapse, not because of an expected tradition or a rite of passage that is common, that has happened before, that people know of, but rather because of a structural collapse or a collapse of systems or a collapse of culture. And And I wonder, because then in that event, then there is no clear master of ceremony. There's no clear person there to support people through the transition. And I remember that Sal Kolzai, the Hungarian philosopher, he's written a lot about what happens then. The tricksters and the false prophets and the misguidance arises. The people who think they have all the solutions to the problems, and then people end up in the wrong place or misguided or in a situation that is unexpected, and when there is no clear way out. And sometimes that means they remain in limbo, right? So I'm wondering if, because this issue that we are identifying and that you have identified in your work is the result of some form of collapse. It's not working, and therefore the system, you know, the master program collapses. The system, the transition doesn't work like it should. How we make sure then that these students are not lost in limbo, and that does it then always end up being us, the teachers, who become the master of ceremonies that help the students through? And in that case, are we seeing ourselves as, you know, absolutely necessary, which I'm not always sure we are, because I think very often people solve their own journey. They make their own path, and especially students very often are extremely resilient in that sense. But yeah, because I'm seeing, you know, straight away all the theoretical ideas of like the trickster can be, you know, the administrators that just wants the grade passed, and the structure that's expecting this and this number of students to graduate, or you know, that there are all these misinformations that enter a space that is otherwise about a transition that can be healing or abolitionist or whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah, it's not a specific question, but it's just thinking about the idea of transition as not always something that has a given entry and a given exit, but a chaos that can occur.
I think about change and information, lectures, curriculums, all these materials we give to students. What do we expect? How can we measure? And when does change happen? And how it happens? I'm very preoccupied with the process. And I can just give. I do not master, or I do not have control, but I can give what I have. And then the rest of the work is done by students themselves, if really I have managed to push the right button, which I don't know if I have. I have to check all the time, and where is the student? Does the student understood or understand what I was saying? Or I'm disappointed at the end when I'm in the exam committee and there is a question, then I'm, oh my God, after 2 years, okay. And now the command trust, French, English, Norwegian is
French. Say it in French, will help you.
Consolation.
The reconciliation. Or the comfort.
The comfort, yes. Trust in Norwegian. It is, I just think, okay, failing or not failing, the fact that they meet something different, they will think about it later on in life. So this is what I build on. For example, this semester, last semester, and I gave up almost, but I said, okay, even failing also is also a learning process. It's not only the lectures, it's not only the curriculum, but the relation that was established with the unknown, with me, will create some difference in the learning process or learning path of these students. So maybe the right can be controlled or not controlled. We are lucky that we can think and research. But it doesn't mean that we have a solution. We are just trying to get the best or to make the best from the situation. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm a bit conscious of time because now we have gone over the time. So I was wondering if maybe Mayssa and Rachel, if you want to say something, like some famous last words, and we should wrap it up if there is no, yeah.
Okay, I will. I like the title of the meeting, Constructing Common Ground. And if we have really to do it together, it is really a process that we should make sure that we do it together. We cannot construct something common alone. And this has been maybe the critic or the challenge with existing structures. And when we talk about colonialism or other oppressing or dominating structure, we want really to get out of these boxes constraining us. I think facilitating a space where these differences can strengthen each other, can help us to build the unknown. The future is unknown. And we are working to this unknown future. So we have to make sure that we have the necessary tool to do it. And the tool is by exchanging, by thinking on what we have already or getting it from others. So thank you for sharing these experiences with and meeting the whole group. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. And it's difficult to find like ending words because they need to sound very smart and summarizing. And I think it's sure that we failed in doing that. But I was thinking a lot about Henry's comment in relation to, do we need to decolonize European epistemology, especially in Eurocentric spaces or in white spaces? I'm not sure I have an answer. I think, though, that the decolonizing and anti-colonial work have started not from white spaces. This is where it started. And this is where we need also to still refer mainly, even if in reality with what is happening with decolonizing becoming a trend, that now the voices we hear the most are voices in Eurocentric institutions. But the reality is that there is a lot of work being done in the south of the world. And I think we do need to listen more there, to collaborate more there. What I still think is that because white spaces are not 100%, like they are very diverse, and it's a lot of people migrating, and it's a lot of people that are there, we do need to create more equal opportunities everywhere also. It's not about a divide of the south or the north. But I do believe that for sure in an anti-colonial movement, it needs to start probably, and like the biggest strength should start in the south. But it's a common responsibility for everyone wherever they are to contribute and to do, our part of it. And maybe, and as Rachel said, no one can change anything by themselves, but it's really about collaborating together. It starts with discussions, but it needs to go also a little bit beyond, about mobilization, about creating forces and masses that want to do things differently and challenge the status quo. Yeah, and that's not very smart, but I will keep that as my ending words.
It was brilliant, Marisa. It was brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lena, do you have any final words of wisdom, or shall I bring us to a close? Okay, so I want to leave everyone with a small quote that I think is very fitting by an amazing scholar that I've been reading a lot lately, called Francis B. Nyamjo. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. But he said that it is in one's interest and in the interests of others to acknowledge that being and becoming is an eternal process of incompleteness. So we are always going to be, as Rachel said, we are going to be on this path, and we are going to continue becoming new things, and trying to figure out who we are and what we are and how to be. And yet the process will always be incomplete, and that is the nature of humanity. So let's hope that this is one small grain of sand in a much bigger conversation that is being had out there, and that we will continue to have. And thank you everyone for participating and for sharing your thoughts. And thank you so much to the speakers and to Lena, my co-organizer. And that will be all from us today. Thank you.